Good viewer, you are watching Exertus. This is because Exertus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Exertus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Exertus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Exertus. Your friends will come to like Exertus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Exertus. See, that was easy.
So long as I'm in this Oval Office.
Do not forget that these people on screen only exist on screen. These are the perceptions of reality and not to be confused with actual reality. This is only a simulation of Stefan Yoga Poser having his first time appearance on this podcast. Again, good to see you for the first time again. How you been?
Thank you for remembering our running joke for those who are keeping track at home. And sorry for keeping everybody waiting. I know that when everyone's watching this days from now, there isn't much context, but I almost left Andreas waiting at the altar, so to speak.
Oh, you know what it is? Someone was asking, they're like, why is the show not on time? But in an accolade to
I was doing King of the Castle, King on his throne, but really just, dropping some kids off the pool for...
You were saving the world, I'm sure. But, with...
try to make untoward jokes and not stray into anything too heretical today. I know Gunwoo was really firing off the F-bombs, and you told him you were going to wash his mouth out and treat him like a sailor or something. And...
Yeah, well, the way I treat sailors is different. I was going to give an accolade to Bernie, Crypto Alchemist, who says always start a show late because it brings in people, and I think he's not wrong. Let's start with the reminder of what heresy is. Heresy is a doctrine or opinion which is at variance with established standards. Okay, so at some point, the Catholic Church started equating it with immorality and sodomy and Satanism, blah, 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 blah. When people say heresy now, they're using a very Occidental, pejorative, Catholic definition, which is not a correct definition.
The divine wins and God's voice used to just be what radio stations you were able to tune into. And then, the words get appropriated. What I was referring to is as far as...
For sure.
So during your previous stream with
good old Gunwoo
was on there, and then your friend who is he a Latter-day Saint, and he had his 3 kids in the background from...
Oh gosh, yeah, he's that Jacob Isbell, yeah, Jacob. He is, but he's technically they pushed him to the side. He's definitely ex-church, you know what I mean? Because they pushed him to the side because he doesn't buy into Brighamism. So the way that they kind of abandoned Brigham Young's whole, he created a whole bunch of stuff. They just ignore it now. He thinks that whole thing was not, you just have to get rid of the whole thing. And that's basically, they're like, well, but we continue our the reason we have authority is because we took it from a guy, took it from a guy, took it from a guy. You know what I mean?
Right,
By the way,
there's the omissions where even in, I was raised very Reformed Judaism. I'm looking up Sophia, who's the goddess, a Jewish goddess. I thought
that's
we were
it's our mommy. No.
Knowledge, and she's not a matriarch. And I'm going, where was I? I paid attention in Hebrew school.
Wait. Did they really tell you were monotheistic in Hebrew school? No, right? Because they tell you you're henotheistic, right? Like the idea is that they literally say, like, it's a cool tattoo style. And no, henotheism, Heno. Let's like pull it up.
That's how I fake my freckles. No.
Henotheism is what Abrahamic religions are. Like, so Judaism, Muslims, Christianity, they believe that there is a supreme God of their own, despite the possible existence of other gods. For instance, in the Bible, it says, have no other gods before me. Unless God is just like an insanely jealous woman, then they're not making up random possible boyfriends. Like, there probably are other.
was like jealous on behalf of the one true God statue, because Abraham went in and smashed all the idols except one. And then, I don't know. But see, there's a parallel story from Egyptian dynasties where there's certain regions where all the faces of all the gods are chiseled out except the sun god. And that was why we said, Ra was their central, the one thing.
Did you watch that?
About. But what I really think happened is, like, it was phases and everyone fell out of favor. And eventually there was just one guy's face left and they decided not to chisel it out. And it happened to be the sun god. But, it was,
Did you watch? So Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom.
Yes.
And I'm gonna screw this up. What's Sophia in the Sephirot? Wisdom in Hebrew. Come on, help me out here. Wisdom.
Sure, you're not asking for the Kabbalah. You're asking for
Chakma, bro. Chakma. Chakma. No. So this is wisdom, and it's up here on the top right here of the Sephirot, with the tree of life. Okay. And people like to say Sephirot, they like to say tree of life. It doesn't matter. You can call it what you want. People like tree of life because it just sounds Western. And then you can get to the Yggdrasil and everything. Like, everybody's got the tree of life concept. But if you're thinking of it like your spirit and quantum entanglement is connected to the tree of life, Sophia or Chakma is the top right. And so this idea of Binah, right? And Binah is this idea of understanding. Understanding is separate from wisdom. And so some would consider, like, the crown, which is like source, to be broken up into male and female. And people get upset about this idea. Like, you're not supposed to talk about the heavenly feminine, the heavenly mother aspect of things.
It could be a biological text that's been mistranslated, and it's talking about how we have two hemispheres and they have different natures, and it's positive, negative. It's seen as male, female, but so my understanding is there's the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, and this is based on an understanding of that I gleaned through Dan Brown's novel. The guy who wrote.
Oh well, there you go.
But it was a lost symbol where there's the sun who comes out tattooed with everything, and there was like a choice. You either have the tree, you get to eat from the tree of knowledge, in which case you're not really interested in money because you realize how evil.
Let me just respond to Shadow. Heresy is not a contradiction of reason. That would be an oxymoron. Heresy, I will die on this point, is a school of thought. It is a school of thought. You can read any of the Council of Nicaea. You can read any of the arguments of Augustine of Hippo. You can look at what they're saying, and what they're saying is, over here the Donatans or the Donatists are a different school of thought than us. They believe everyone has to be pure without sin in order to perform the Eucharist. We think you can be a little sinful. That's what the Catholic Church was saying. And they said that these guys, they're heretics in the sense that, hey, this other school here that has this other thought, like this heresy over here that's believing this thing, we don't agree with them. And at a certain point, it became literally satanic to not agree with life.
But it means you get money, and then you're maybe not able to access the motivation or the capacity somehow. You're kind of restricted from the realms of true understanding. And that's kind of so the true understanding in terms of heresy, like Galileo was seen as a heretic because he was adherent to what we call the scientific method, and we've pathologized the scientific method and the skeptical mindset of approaching a thoughtscape and a thought experiment.
And what Galileo literally did was he blasphemed. And blasphemy doesn't necessarily mean what people think it does either. I mean, it kind of does. Blasphemy tends to mean to speak against God and to speak against the perfection of God. And I find that interesting because whenever someone believes that they had to murder God in order to create this atonement justice, instead of that God's all powerful, God can do anything, then what they're doing is they're blaspheming. They're saying God has restrictions of power. It's really interesting. But
Well,
they use the word to mean
Galileo blasphemed because he said that there were invisible atomic-sized particles that were fiery and explosive that could pass through solid matter and then interact with things on the other side, like infrared radiation. Like, he described it perfectly, but in a documentary today, it's described as one of his most outlandish theories.
And he said that who's to say that these spheroids that they're being created, these imaginary spheroids of momentum, were necessarily perfect? Because they were saying, well, maybe if those exist, and you're at least saying that those things are perfect. Well, I don't know that.
Once every 10 years, you got to revisit the settled science with fresh eyes, and hopefully not have to redo everything that it doesn't really chip away all the way at the base of your foundation of knowledge.
Wisdom of Solomon. So this is another part to that's interesting to me about this is like a lot of these people that I run into on the internet now, they want to say you got to believe in the Bible or not the Bible, and I have to ask which one, because the Catholics have like 13 extra books. No, a lot of people don't have the Wisdom of Solomon. And so
have you heard of Nag Hammadi?
Oh, for sure, right? Exactly, the Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi. But I just really quickly, I would say
the dating of it, and you're either saying that this predates what we already have, and therefore can be used in addition to it. But then you're like getting into the Mishnah and the Talmud interpretations of the text, and you're still not leaving the language in which you learned it, which is probably not the language in which it was formulated. And so that's an extension of the analogy of the ship of Theseus that I came across recently in my own kind of mental manipulations, realizing that
if you turn the ship of Theseus into a helicopter, is it still a ship? You know.
Well, no, but linguistically speaking, they had the first analog computers was you could feed in, and this was in relation to one of your tweets. So I actually did have I have a few show notes, and one of the things at the beginning, I think, instead of just posting things on social media and trying to get people to, make comments or whatever, so you get Twitter or X dollars, one thing we could do as part of our streams is go pick 3 or 4 things that we like the other person did, or show off something that you liked and go through it.
Compliment, criticism, compliment.
And try to get the audience to kind of buy into more than just watching the live stream or watching some of the old videos, but beginning to get the drip, so to speak.
I gotta start doing cuts, because like with titles like you can't say that, no one's gonna know that we're gonna talk about the Wisdom of Solomon, the Heavenly Mother. So I'm thinking if we have like sections and stuff, this is a good moment. This is a good. I gotta say, this is a good moment. Anybody who watches this show and you're interested in like helping with this show, because I am kind of doing it all by myself, if you wanted to help, that'd be sweet. Tech spreads at the Discord. What I'd love is to go to tartarynova.com Discord and like talk to me about somebody who wants to help me make clips. Because there's there's literally 1,000 episodes now or something like that.
And you also need someone who has an encyclopedic knowledge and memory of when you said what, because there's
just kidding.
Clips that make me laugh out loud every time I watch you, whether it's a quick draw reaction or you're being sarcastic.
Well, we've had like Emily does timestamps. So it's not as hard as it could be, because we do have timestamps on most of the videos. I need to pin those. But again, it's like, there's a lot of content.
Yeah, I've held off on doing, because what you're saying, it would be okay if I went and started a channel called Xirtus, instead of calling it clips, because clips apparently in mafia speak means like
Briss. Yeah, it should be called Xirtus Briss. Yeah.
But so I came up with this. Ready? It's called, and maybe you'll help me choose. It's called Snippets, Bits, and Clips. Or Snippets, Bits, and Clips. Or Snippets, Bits, and Quips. Or something along those lines. And it's like a really
Xirtus extracts. Come on.
It's like your Bach saga. It's like you just got to come up with something and then cut to it. So in watching the Colbert Report develop over time, and then you can do those bits onto late night.
Yeah, little ADD. But no, I'm gonna lose my mind if I don't say this story. When I went to church one time and I'm talking about the Heavenly Mother, I was like, yeah, the Heavenly Mother, because I grew up knowing about the Heavenly Mother, not only as a Catholic who has Mother Mary, and as a Californian who has like a feminist doctor mother. Like, you grow up with the Heavenly Mother as kind of a concept, and a lot of people are like, what? No, some people think you're not supposed to talk about the femininity of God at all. I'm like, well, dude, just pull open your Bible, bro. Just pull it open, bruh. And you go to Wisdom of Solomon. Yeah, wisdom. Anybody? Nobody has this book. What happened?
Didn't Trump kill that guy, Soleimani? Oh no, different guy.
Different guy. Still interesting. But the point is the Wisdom of Solomon's in the King James Catholic Bible and not in the King James regular Bible. I don't think it's really weird that you can't find the Wisdom of Solomon book. And it talks about wisdom. And if you read it, it's obviously when it says wisdom, it's translated here as wisdom, lowercase, but it's actually a capital name, Sophia. So Sophia in the Bible verse, if you go, you can find Proverbs 8, she speaks for herself in the regular Bible.
And speaking of capital, though, it would have been a capital crime to call her a goddess at certain points, though. But that's a separate issue.
Well, so that's the whole idea of like God, Odin, like the Norse idea of like lower deities that have free agency is not the same as source, like Narayana, right? If we look at like more complicated concepts of deification, this idea that God, Yahweh,
I have an uncle named Narayan, actually.
That's pretty cool. Yeah,
but I don't know what Narayana means. I never asked him.
Narayana means source, essentially. So a lot of people think of it as like, oh, this is like one of the forms of Vishnu. Not quite. Some people think of it as the ultimate form of Vishnu, sort of. But the idea that Vishnu got, at some point, this Persian Vaishnavist cult, or I don't want to say cult, but this religious group, they said, hey, Vishnu is so awesome. Vishnu is actually the embodiment of source, of Narayana, right? Of the first body of existence, essentially. So Narayana and Yahweh are really similar concepts. It's sort of like without end. In fact, they own the beginning and the end within source, right? That's kind of the idea. So from source comes the father and the mother in that sense.
So is Yahweh is another word for God, and you can write Yahweh, and then whereas if you write the word of God, you have to like scribble.
Yahweh's also a tetragrammatron, right? Like the tetragrammatron is this idea of the 4-letter acronym that means more. It's a compiling because you're not supposed to say the actual name of God, and the name of God has like mathematical value to it. It's supposed to actually represent something, but Elohim is like plural for literally gods, right? And then Hashem.
The tetragrammatron, I think is so. What is? I guess to recall one of your tweets you recently posted about Sanskrit grammar and the complexity of it, and how some guy wrote 8 books on just grammar.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Why is a certain book banned from the Bible? There are chemical formulas for medicine that will send you to heaven, whether that means you're actually going to die or you're just going to go into such extreme ecstasy that you'll be detached from the regular mortal plane. Is a questionable issue. And when it's all in one document, there's just a simple cipher you run, and even by accident, someone could find it. Whereas when you have 48 treatises, so here's the big picture is that Mendeleev named the elements that he predicted to exist in the future with prefixes and suffixes that were mimicking the Greek format in kind of Latin format of adding parts to words, but he did it with the words eka and dvi and tree, which are Indian, very distinctly. Eka meaning one in Sanskrit or in certain Hindi languages. So,
and it becomes discovery in Latin, right?
So what Mendeleev did in terms of blasphemy was he corrected the record. So when you say what is the word of God, and it's just what's published, and what you can when you go to the printer's office and you say print me another copy of the exact works of so and so, and then there was a guy named Eratosthenes who is also named Beta, because in the Library of Alexandria, Beta reference, and but he was always like, he was never the best at everything, but he was always like near the top, so to speak. And that might have been again just who checked out the library books, and
it's still good,
Yeah, but so the idea of a 4-element system too. There's 3-element system, which is Indian, and then Kappa Pitta Vata. Then there's 4 and 5-element system: earth, air, fire, water, and sometimes there's metal or other things added in. But when you look at the periodic table in Mendeleev,
tetragrammaton.
I have an architectural background, and I can see in the layout there's designs for technology.
And I saw Captain Planet, so I see where you're going with Yahweh.
Yeah. But so the way that we're passing information forward into the future versions of ourselves and future civilizations, we don't know if they're going to be good people, bad people. But when you discover something pretty like the periodic table, this arrangement of things that seems to be consistent and hold up, it seems worthwhile preserving. Now, Mendeleev was able to, again, he had 10 or 12 siblings that all lived in different countries around the world and spoke different languages. He spoke all of them, basically, it seems, and published in German and a couple other things, thinking it would slip through, and then publishing it in kind of early Gothic and early English type text, because one way to kind of give a middle finger to the people that are calling you a heresy is to write exactly what they don't want you to write in their language, which was to prove that uranium existed. Okay, so it's like a safeguard. Like, people tore that page out of the book and they pretended that, you know, we have this chart and we can't quite really figure it out, because if you really do figure out the periodic table, it's very empowering, let's put it that way, for, you know, the average person. But the structure that Dmitri,
this freaked, you gotta emphasize that point. Like, Dimitri's first periodic table freaked people out, because he's like, actually, it is all just 4 elements. Actually, it is. Well, it's literally just mass.
Shell is 8, and you're either
it's really
just 4.
It's mass. It comes down to a mass characteristic.
You don't need the number. You don't need to be above base 4 to understand atomic.
But this was literally the same beliefs as Arabic alchemists in the 16th century and before, and it was completely opposite to what 19th century scientists had learned by messing around with vapors, electrolysis of aluminum. They were under the impression that they're like, wow, the ancients were ridiculous. There were clearly more than 4 elements. They didn't understand. They were like, wow, we're so clever. And here comes a guy who proves to them, no, actually, this is all just mass. You're looking at different mass. You're looking at different sp2 orbitals. They didn't quite understand that yet.
Or like Quicksilver. Quicksilver was gallium, was mercury, was an alloy of them. And then if you keep the metal, or you can dope water with salts, you can create something that functions the same way. So they called it Quicksilver. And then we say, well, but look, there's a symbol, and that means it means this specific mercury. And in certain contexts, it did or didn't. But they didn't have the specific charts to point to say, is this what you're talking about or not? Now, the really clever thing, again, that architects did is outside the forts are laid out in the shape of an internal combustion engine, or other types of shapes or symbology encoded into the floor plan and shape of the building, you know, towers to the dome. But when it comes to, if the Indian culture really discovered and kept secret the periodic table because of its power, because one thing that's at the end of it, again, being radioactive elements in uranium, and if the average person knows, oh, so you're saying that if I just keep refining these things and doing this, that, or the other, I'm going to end up with something that glows. And then people mix it with glass, and then at night, everything's glowing, and people don't live very long. They don't really know why. Galileo went blind at the end of his life because he was working on technical glass, and he was cutting glass that was doped with cesium, with all these other things that had a high refractive index, and then assembling directionally these things that could not only focus optical light, but also, you know, radio waves, X-rays, and then project them through his telescope and receive them through what we call a telescope. But so I was watching a documentary, and this is a straight up quote from something that's like BBC Chronicle. It said Galileo, before he died, had his students complete, and they call, this is an exact quote, a satellite computer, but he was too visually impaired to use it by the time they completed it. Brutal. And so where is it? That's what I want to know is, okay, you said they finished it and he never used it. So in other words, it's intact. And maybe, again, people have taken it apart and reassembled pieces, trying to figure out what they were. It was probably a mechanical computer that was designed to kind of track the position of the stars, to confirm or deny the results, or see if they were shifting or changing. But it's one of these things, you type it into Google and it's going, no. These are not the droids you're looking for. This is in Greek. This is in Hebrew. We can't even pronounce the letters we're putting up on the screen when you try to, it's like North Atlantic Bridgeways is in an English book called, you know, the Montauk Effect or something. And, you know, what's a North Atlantic Bridgeway? No, just because you can cut down 4 acres of forest and string it end to end and reach Europe, you know, no big deal. We'll just forget that those things.
We do have, speaking of clips, we do have this 3-hour episode, which is one of my favorites that we've done in this last year, which is on the Nebra Sky Disk. Do you remember the Nebra Sky Disk thing? So yeah. I find that interesting because when we were wondering about what kind of computer, I earlier this week watched an episode on the Soviet space computer, and it's really interesting. It has a this is it. It's this little box here. Let me
What's
go to
its name?
It's called the Globus. Globus.
Oh, it's got a globe inside of it? That's wild, dude.
Yeah. So this is pretty sweet. Let me go to the front picture. This is what it would look like in space. Okay. So it can give you, I mean, and that's pretty practical because if you're trying to imagine.
Cool, dude.
Yeah. The way it spins around and everything, if you're using, I mean, regardless of what model Earth you're looking at, like you can use either model of Earth for charting if you have the math correct. So this is probably the most practical way for them to imagine where they're going in certain way. I mean, there's probably a reason why it's useful for international surveillance, but it's all designed so that you can pull open with gears and you don't have to worry about this thing having a EMP break it down because it's completely physical. And this thing worked until 2002. You know, like they used this thing the entire space program. So in considering how you would have a computer that doesn't look like a computer, there's probably a lot of things that we're not aware of that we think
my
that it's just
education
art.
is in material science, and as a construction specifier, you have to understand the finish on the nail so that it doesn't, you know, have a conflict with the pressure treating in the wood. So when I see this Phaistos disc, what I see is something that is purportedly 5,000 years old that has not rusted into a pile of dust. So that's even cooler than whatever drawing is on there, if you ask me.
Right.
And the reason I had this theory that the reason that certain knights were leaving coins and bullion in foreign banks in very specific places with people that they could trust not to touch it is because they were testing the
Material science,
corrosive. Like, we're going to come back in 500 years and see if this has corroded or not. You know, Copernicus, copper, nickel. Apparently, the American government has one person that they can buy, you know, the quarter stock from. That's this thin layer of zinc and aluminum. And the American quarter is pretty remarkable. You know, even when they shifted away from silver, they somehow knew exactly what to go do for a coin that might last a very long time. So how do I share screen? Where is that? How's it hiding from me?
It's got to be right down there where it says
you.
While you're doing that, let me just say, isn't Quicksilver underrated? I mean, I know I'm more of a I guess I'm more of a DC guy, but really I'm not against Marvel, and I like Rob Liefeld, and I like Image Comics, and I prefer Image Comics. Okay, I said it. All right. And then while you're pulling up your screen, because I know it's still not up, do you remember the Young Abraham CGI show? Did they show this to all the young Jews at shul? Did you
Young
see this?
Abraham.
Oh God, I love Young Abraham.
I like little baby Jesus.
I'm like a Fuju, like anything for us, by us, like to train Jewish kids to know about Judaism is an interesting thing to watch to me. The one, where's this? I just have to type in CGI Young Abraham scene. Maybe that'll work. So this movie is like amazing. So it's about young Abraham. His father, Torah or Tartaria, I don't know, something like that. Toron, Torok. I forget the video game. He's supposed to sacrifice his son. He doesn't want to do it. He rushes his son out. His son ends up in a cave. And from the perspective of Neoplatonic Jews and modern Talmudic rabbis, they've definitely explored Abraham's story in the cave as a child from the perspective of Plato's cave. And you have this idea that
like
Abraham,
an analogy of someone who got stuck in the birth canal and then was born.
I mean, that's another reason I love the Jewish commentary, because everybody has the most wild metaphor for what this story is really about. And I think they're all
the Hunchback of Notre Dame is about sewing a fetus into a vein in your back and carrying it that way. Or that's what the Pope's hat was for, was to hide where,
see how wild this could get really quickly. Basically, the reason I like the Plato's cave analogy is he's raised in a cave where he has not the opportunity to see the world. He's not seeing God's world. And all the people outside of that cave, they worship idols. When he gets out, he's working for his uncle in an idol shop. But since he has no experience outside of Plato's cave, those symbols do not sway him. And so he is swayed by the unseen God, which he sees in everything because he does not see its face in anything. Right?
See, VBDC was complaining that this ancient knowledge and mystery school stuff was hidden on purpose. And I would say that hidden versus kept secret is a very vague. So let's say you had a tablet and you were walking up to literally someone who's lived in a cave their whole life. You might first literally do this demonstration of Plato's cave where you're making puppets and you're going, hey, look, I'm doing this flash lightning thing over here and it's making noise or it's making pictures of it. Because then when you pull out the screen, they have a context and you're saying, look, this isn't wizardry. This is just an effect of light. And it's more complicated than the simple shadow and light arrangement. But there are great books and engravings celebrating these teachers who were jacks of all trade, Renaissance men. And it says that they were willing to, you could ask them anything. And they have these whole display curio cabinets with all
people were swayed. People were swayed by this, right? So I feel like nihilists are are nihilists like the most approachable by spirituality then, because they're able to accept that it could just be shadow play, but as long as they feel it's worth it? I mean, for the love.
Judaism, or modern Reform American Judaism, promotes this questioning mentality. We have a holiday called Passover, where the youngest person at the table asks 4 questions, and they're somewhat obvious questions. But every year, the tradition is to allow the youngest person to have a voice and to ask questions and get responses that, instead of saying, "Oh, you idiot, of course it's this," it's simply explained. And so this questioning mindset, it doesn't mean that you are trying to find the inconsistencies, as they said in the Big Short about whose character, the guy, how am I forgetting the guy who played Batman? Anyways, in the Big Short, Batman.
What do you mean?
I'm reaching my Dunbar's number here.
Oh, are you talking about the guy who played
got
in
really skinny for the movie.
in American Psycho?
Yeah, what's his name?
Oh, Christian Bale.
Thank you. My goodness.
Please don't use Batman next time you're trying to get Christian Bale's
I
name.
fear it's like one day someone really famous that I've watched all of their movies is going to come into the studio, and I'm just going to be like,
what's your name again?
Evan James, right?
Oh man, that happened to me one time. I went to this party in LA with a friend of mine for the guy who played in Thor, and we were supposed to be really like only friends of the guy, and so we let my friend come, and I didn't really know him that well. And my friend comes up to him and he says like he heckles him. He's like about how horrible Thor is and how he hates comic books and that Disney's trash. And I was just like, and then he's like, "Who's this guy again?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that happens." No, but Christian Bale, that's who you meant. He's a beautiful man. He did a good job in American Psycho. I know that's not like church-rated material, but I don't care. You should love that movie. It's a great book. Yeah, I said it. What was your point? Oh, and you also pulled something up. Did you finally get this working? I'm sorry.
Well, this was, again, I've got a whole bunch of notes that I can read through. This was simply something about Sophia, if we wanted to just circle back to that, and talking about the demiurge and about how there's something called the Lal de Boath, which, again, Google Translate makes all different types of
all week I've been hearing people mispronounce Yaldabaoth. I love it. It's like that was on everyone's mind this week is Yaldabaoth. I love that.
Well, but so this idea that even with Google and with the modern computer systems being able to translate between languages, there are homophones, there are homonyms, there are synonyms, there are different contexts where certain words are appropriate or not. So one of the specifically tying back to what we were talking about before, there was something called the binding tablets, and the binding tablets were also translated as the fixation of the file. And what it was a little like a ceramic tile that had an etching of it. So if you were going to settle a contract and kind of make it so, one version of the fixation of the file would be to fire the clay of the tablets and then glaze it so that it doesn't corrode. So that Phaistos disc, again, maybe it was corroding, and some scientists in England at the museum figured out a shellac to paint it with, in which case that shellac is really, 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 really cool and probably important, and because that disc has not changed apparently very much. And so it's like the ancient Egyptian sock that they found that's like 5 different colors, and it's 4,000 years old. I'm going, and they're all just arguing about where it came from, what it signifies. Did it mean they had dye? Okay. The dye lasted how long? 5,000 years? My pants fade after like 2 washes. And then, for all you know, it was a chemical test strip. And the dyes that they used, they dip it in a solution and it changes color according to the chemical properties. And we think it's a sock because it fits on a foot and it's woven out of fabric with dye in it. But again, it's like, however it's presented to children, so misses the point of what is actually interesting about these artifacts. And the type of science that can be done on them isn't to prove that they were this, that, or the other, or they came from, is to analyze. Again, let's say this is a 5,000 or 2,000-year-old piece of fabric that somehow endured, and the colors have endured as well. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's true. It's amazing. I mean,
so again, my screen share game isn't going to be that exciting outside of
every once in a while I'll jump back to AI art of Yaldabaoth. But I was going to say I saw a book for sale recently from like 400 years ago, and it was $50,000 to $80,000 Antique Roadshow kind of like thing. And for the most part, anything that's 1,000 years old is nearly priceless. It's getting to millions of dollars in value. So it's crazy to think that the best they can do is say, well, this should be a hoax, because it doesn't make sense that 5,000 years old, 4,000 years old, this thing could exist. Yet they can't prove it's a hoax. In fact, they've proven it was real. I find that really interesting. That happens a lot. Also, simultaneously, it's like Monet, isn't it right? There's like at least several of the Monet they know for a fact are fake. So, but they can't figure out which one it is, and so there's just all the Monets are selling for like millions and tens of millions of dollars at a time, but there's at least two or three of them they know have to have been faked, right? And they just can't
what's
figure out
more
which one they are.
ridiculous is crypto or actual artwork that may or may not be real. I mean, at least there's an aesthetic value to it, and there's a physical placeholder. There's an implication of custody of an item that's maintained in a certain level of quality, but then you might drain the value of the painting by storing it. So you have, in the original Latin, it was called defixonium tabaje, or again, that could be, so
I like that. Yeah, tabaje.
Defixonium could be definition tablets or decisionum. Oh, decisionum tablet. Like if you were trying to make an analog computer that was trying to pick which grammar or letter to use, you would have defixonium tablet, and it could mean 4 different things. And there are languages in regions of the world where they're tonal, and they may not learn a phonetic alphabet, but they can distinguish with their ear the difference between defixionum tabaje and then defixionum tabaje. And it's like in context. In Latin, qua, depending on where the accent means who, what, where, which, or why, or not precisely, but
think about Chinese. Like Chinese, like every word has a different tonality. Will change if it's a curse word or "I love you" or "soup." It's just insane how different the words are. But the same.
And what's fixation of files? Fixation could mean correcting the record. It could also mean keeping it permanent. And then when it comes to computers, it's like, okay, you got the thing on the magnetic disk or strip. How do you anneal it in place, so to speak, the way that when you fire a clay tablet, the same thing happens. So another interesting double. So there was General Pardinas, who is discussed in this book about demagoguery.
Fat girls. I like how it translated as fat girls. That was pretty funny.
Okay. Yeah. So again, and again, Galatian is... But in general means don't be fools. General Pardinas, and then General Pardinas just translated as general, and it could mean a general pardon, meaning all prisoners free. Like when Maximilius died in the movie The Gladiator.
Pardon me.
Before he passes out, he says, "Free,
don't
free
be
everyone."
Foolish, fat girls. I love it.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And General Pardinas meaning like, no, you have to entertain the troops, and no, they don't mind the women with a little extra.
Yeah. By the way, if you're Galatian and you get this joke, please explain it to us, because I bet you there's some historical reason about this. Like, "Don't be a fat girl" is become an expression for "don't be a fool" in Galatia. I could see that happening in the 15th century.
And so if you go to soul-candy.info, which I just saw as a link, and I'm like, did I accidentally save an untoward link? And I won't even really describe that, because again, if someone's watching this show like a Howard Stern in their car with the kids and Burger King in the background, I'll just go ahead and avoid dropping an F-bomb unless it really adds to the because
what a thoughtful mensch you are.
Anyways, and again, it was like at first I was asking you if there's rules, and you're like, no. It's like when people start giving me a hard time, I bring on Gunwoo to drop like an extra 5 F-bombs right after the guy with kids. And again, it's like, it's a free world.
There are no rules. There are no rules, only consequences.
Someone has to remain the cool people that use the edgy words, so that when they lose trust in all the other adults, but so catechesis, which for adults means that they're more willing and able to accept Christian discipline in the world as an adult, and to evangelize and to cry out for justice. But so when you type it into Google, it translates as cat cheese.
Yeah.
Which, it's like kitten milk. Remember cat milking was the Fockers, Meet the Fockers? And Ben Stiller is like trying to milk a cat. He's trying to milk, and it's a reference, a linguistic, very playful reference, like Shakespearean level, to catechesis, because you can't milk cats, right? That's what I mean. There's no such thing as cat cheese. There's no such thing as becoming a better more complete person as you go along. No, we are imperfect beings that become more imperfect
Maybe,
over
but
time.
there's gotta be a rhyme and a reason. You know, you think about cat string gut for the violin. You can think of also, I mean, the idea of like oral. I think catechism means like orally brought down because they use kata to mean like
That's
from down through.
schism, as Peter Tosh would say. Catechesis, though, the SIS means generation. It's the opposite of
Right.
the ism, I think.
Oh, okay. So yeah, generate, but then again, that's like
For a
through the
rival
generation, through the generations instead of through sound. Then is the idea.
and it has to do with
Thesis.
Cathars and Catholic and
Well, and also like catamaran. I think. I mean, you could the way that the words are misused to mean two and four, like all not misused, but they're adapted to mean like an entire, and an entire could mean two or it can mean four. And so often it's like the cathedral has to do with the four sides and everything, but also has to do with sound, right? Like it seems more and more we're convinced cathedrals don't necessarily have four sides and do have sound, you know, it's the generational sound healing technology.
Well, the opposition to Gothic architecture, this is part of my background with some of the research I was doing. I was maybe tie that in. So Gothic architecture was known for being asymmetrical, and it was seen not as blasphemy, but as a degradation of the perfect Vitruvian symmetry of ancient Rome. And that may have been what allowed them to kind of hone in and create arrays within the architecture where there's metal supports or that are accidentally on purpose creating antennae or ways to send and receive signals that are flying through the air like Hermes, so to speak. And there's giant subwoofer ports, it seems, on a lot of church faces and that sort of thing.
Oh my gosh! Brittany's dad has a church speaker that he got from one of the churches that shut down, and it's like a handmade speaker with like 52 channels that some church guy built. And you have to imagine like how many of these Midwestern churches are inventing their own speakers in the 70s and 80s, trying to figure out how to like be loud enough, like competing with the Grateful Dead.
That's what it used to mean to be blasphemous and heretical, was to broadcast too loudly on shared frequencies.
You know why also, right?
They would excommunicate you. Get it?
Yeah, what's it called? The Muslims do that. So they have the Muslim prayer tower. What's it called again?
Okay.
I'm sorry. The minarets. So if you go to Minneapolis, you'll find minarets that have subwoofers now. But it used to be a minaret was like a soapbox. Like you go up there and you pray and you preach, right? So they have minarets from all of the mosques. And a lot of the mosques are giant and beautiful because they only get one in their entire community. But if you're like Bosnia or you go to the Middle East, you'll find these adorable little Bosnian.
And it still gives us as an ability as humans to point at it and go, see, there's the technology. When in reality, when you step it back even further, my understanding is that in Austin, Texas, there's a certain area where it looks like Roman architecture. It's built with granite and limestone. And when Owen Schroyer or Alex Jones is walking around doing street interviews, they have a microphone in their hand and it's recording into the sound system. That's, they've got a camera guy and a sound guy. But it's also then resonating into a radio frequency that is emitted by the building and the parapet walls and all the
if only people realize how similar they were to the Muslims. Integration. That's the only way.
Integration. That's one way to put it. Well, so Andres,
man,
we're talking about a discovery, and again, if you're not allowed to talk about it, and it was a slip of.
Go for
you were
it.
talking
I'm
about how
also pull up a picture while you do that, Captain Confederacy.
There was a discovery about transmitting data, wirelessly through latent structures and architecture or geology, so to speak, of the Earth.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
and that we don't even need the satellites or to bury anything. If you just aim it at the right rock that's doped with the right substances, it will act as a resonator for it.
Right. I mean, well, the idea of the crystal quartz, and we're starting to realize now it's not electrons flowing, but it's field being generated. So, of course, it makes way more sense if you can create a larger field. I just forgot. I was reading this comic this week, and you can get this on archive.org. Captain Confederacy. Have you seen this? She is
like a Colbert spinoff. No.
Pregnant person of color fighting against injustices in the I think it's a Captain Confederacy. Is it a Marvel or Epic? It's Epic Comics. Elseworld kind of thing. But DC usually does Elseworld. Still, an amazing comic book about a superhero, and I think we need more integration. That was basically it. Also, Hellfire Club. Have you seen the Hellfire Society 1961?
I have not seen the movie.
Oh, dude,
Is this
Hellfire.
about moonshine running or?
No, so Hellfire Club, Hellfire Society, Hellfire Club 1961. You can get the book, I guess, and you can find the movie from those OK-Ru Russia websites. But basically, I think it's about Benjamin Franklin as a kid. So sort of. It starts out with these two boys are playing around in the woods, and they come across their father and their mother and everybody in this weird cave, all dressed up in beautiful Masonic regalia, in front of a sort of Anton LaVey Church of Satan like altar where there's a woman on the altar. I mean, again, this is 1750, so these kids are like, "Whoa, we're not used to seeing this." And they're so completely shocked, and they're finding out, wow, their parents are members, their fathers are members of the secret society, and it's way weird. Like, it's the Hellfire Club, you know, like it doesn't seem very Christian from the get-go. And yeah, I don't want to completely ruin it for you, but like if you wanted to know a bit more about how the Hellfire Club started in Ireland and its connections, and how Benjamin Franklin and the Americans continued the Hellfire Club because the government wasn't completely against them having a Hellfire Club. They were able to move it to the United States. And yeah, I mean, this is 1961, so there's pasties, but for the most part, it's a movie that's really historical and important to watch. I recommend that one. The other one I saw this week again, which I've been looking for this movie for like 15 years. I was trying to remember this movie. I saw this movie.
Satyricon. Oh my gosh.
I saw this movie when I was like 15, 16. And it was so good.
Yeah, I had an older brother who somehow got me into some really cool stuff. As I just respected his taste enough that everyone thought he was weird for liking Fellini. So I'm like, Fellini's my guy.
Oh, Fellini's great. Yeah, no, Fellini's amazing. Satyricon is kind of about a a Roman orgy, but in the literal sense of what orgies were, which were essentially not very different than a high school party. Like the American Pie high school beer party is a lot like, and it's just, we think we're so different. You know what I mean? We think we're so special. We think they are so bad and we're not so bad, but really it's not very different. And the only thing I found too different was I was like, God, I wish I was in a Fellini film when I was 16. That was the only difference. I figured I would look cool.
Fellini had City of Women too, which was a modern take on like a new age society where women were predominantly controlling everything. There was, you know, a 10-minute segment of a woman with 10 husbands, and it's basically him stumbling Marco Polo style through, or Don Quixote style almost, through this just series of experiences where there's people.
It literally, it's really worth watching. It reminds me of growing up in Santa Cruz. Like, totally, I'm not even kidding. There's a certain level of that movie.
Out on. Man, these pilgrims over here on the East Coast, man.
I don't know if it's as good as you think it is. It's not that different than like Star Wars 7 or something, you know, or 8. I don't know which one's worse, but have you heard of the House of David?
I benefit from the knowledge that people still gather for it may be like not wampum. It's there's a Native American festival where they eat plant medicine together. It's like, I don't have to be part of it or invited or know where it's happening, but the idea that it used to happen and it's died out is really kind of sad. So like Gothic were people, and there's Gothic architecture is attributed generally to England, but then it started actually in France, and then they kept calling it Gothic for 1,000 years after. But maybe Gothic, and they said the language itself diverged and then died out. Maybe it was still spoken as a secret language, and that when there's a lot, you know, Martin Liedtke is always, you know, kind of wondering, where are the original plans for all these cities? Does Russia have them on file? Or the Vatican? Again, because that would really tell us a lot about who built the sewer systems 5,000 years ago, because we're clearly standing on ground that's been trod a few times and resettled and repopulated, and you know,
and of course, like the most interesting information we like, for instance, the London Underground. I mean, the British intelligence agencies know a lot that they won't tell you, because the London Underground.
Charles Manson on the stand was quoted as saying, like, you know, all of a sudden he started as an adult speaking English, but he didn't know he spoke English as a child. He was like feral, and then he realized that everyone else was speaking his language, and English has, you know, he understood the French and the additional words, and not a great guy to reference necessarily. But
here's what it is.
But no,
you remember, like the other day, Linus,
that modern English, formal academic English, may actually be a form of written language that exists that predates Latin, actually, as a formal constructed language.
Oh yeah, English the way it exists now. So first off, the grammar is what is ancient, and so this ancient grammar is brilliant, but it's like Swahili. There's really a lot of similarities between Swahili and English. The differences, of course, are the language words, the diction used in that grammar. And so with English, the grammar is picked up from the trading groups that were in the north, as opposed to Swahili.
Okay, so now imagine you're using a vernacular and a vocab and even symbols, and you're two different Slavic languages from different regions where the script is different enough that the
Russian and Croatian,
one person's language or the other, and try to get it.
Yeah.
So in the process of discussing these things, one person thinks they're talking about grammar, and they're talking about a 4x4 chart, and that, it's like, it's okay to make exceptions though, because what we like to do where I'm from is we say the blue car instead of the car blue, or it's like that equivalent. And but so one person though was going, no, you can never go from column 2 to column 1.
But this is you brought up why though.
Backing up on all the words, and one guy's really talking about two chemicals never to mix, and the other guy's talking about just it's like a casual grammar,
Well, you brought up why though, right? Because like earlier when we were talking about like Sanskrit grammar, the reason why you care. Imagine in a world where you're trying to communicate with someone about a concept, and
like the law,
way, what is God? What time of the day is it? Like anything you're trying to get grounded with, and you don't agree on what words mean.
Just little things,
any like love, anything like words themselves build a structure, and so you can't have understanding. That's why it seems like a weird point, but it's an important point. That's
what I was looking for.
Yeah, like Panini's logic was about grammar, and he wrote 4,000 sutras about grammar. You'd think, why would you need in your religious text a book on grammar? Well,
because he was codifying these things to fixate the files in an analog computing system, even if it's done by hand. You have to have a mnemonic for translating this set of information into that set of information, and it doesn't.
And to understand what the qualities, like if you're talking about metaphysics, you're talking about the qualities of God.
Hand, you still have to have a set of decision tables.
Yeah, but if you're talking about the qualities of God, it matters what the definition or the grammar is, because if you're saying this is a God blue or a blue God, it's all of a sudden a little bit more important than if it's a car. And so when you really are trying to understand like the limitations of what something is, or the expansive opportunity for what something can be, you need a better way of exclusive and inclusive contrasting, and without proper logic.
And it's like, are we trying to say if this is describing your God or my God, and is that because it's a good thing or a bad thing, and it doesn't really matter who's right here? And it's like, why don't we talk about sports or even talk about politics, as opposed to whatever specific financial transaction that can be handled and kick the can down the road like the government does all the time, and like the families settle things up, or it's like we eventually make money together, but separate but equal.
Yaldabaoth. Well, I think a lot of the time they didn't know that they were talking about a different God at first, and eventually it became clear that they were going to argue enough about these ideas that they would say, "Oh, there must be a different God." But I think first,
when you say a God, it could be an essence, and so they have a 30% mercury and 70% gallium mix, and in another place it's 70% mercury and 30% gallium. Either way, at room temperature, it's liquid generally. But what happens is the frequencies that one of them is able to pick up or transmit is just somehow not coming through on the other end. And so they're arguing about the God, and it's God being the most important thing. And they're trying to distill and wipe away all the other possibilities and variables until they get so now we're stuck on this ball of metallic goo. My God in this thing is different than the God in your thing, and that means we're like somehow on different wavelengths, or like stuck on different frequencies. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, and then you start analyzing, try to do it on purpose instead of by accident. And hopefully, again, that it leads in the direction of sharing technology and using technology, that when you say it's incorruptible, like Tom Cruise in The Day After Tomorrow, he keeps shouting over as everything bombing, and he the safety on the weapon, how do I turn it off is the safety off on the weapon? Is the weapon off? And the weapon is the transmitter, is like the beacon that's like sending all this information around. And is it good or bad? I don't know, but is it off yet, or is it safe? Is it safety? Is the off on the safety on the weapon? And I was like, Oh, you got muted.
Scientology was trying to keep me from telling you what that secretly meant. Do you want to talk about? We have about a few minutes before we move to the next subject. I was thinking Cadaver Synod. Do you know about the dead Pope trial?
No, I do not.
Okay, so here's the dead Pope trial. So basically, what happened was the Pope Formosus, who had been dead for about 7 months in the Basilica of St. John Lateran in Rome during January 897, was brought out of his tomb. His corpse was put on trial, and the trial was conducted by Pope Stephen VI, the successor to Formosus' successor, Pope Boniface VI.
Hey,
Stephen
that's
had
my
Formosus. Yeah, isn't that cool? Seven actually, went before the show and had Formosus' corpse exhumed and brought to the papal court for judgment. He accused Formosus of perjury, of having exceeded the papacy illegally, and illegally presiding over more than one diocese at the same time. At the end of the trial, Formosus was pronounced guilty, and his papacy was retroactively declared null. He was, I believe, excommunicated. And it's
now,
pretty interesting.
Andreas, your name is your favorite word. When they measure the dopamine response in your brain, Andreas, your favorite word, Andreas, is Andreas.
Even Nicholas got me. That's how messed up I am.
So when you say, imagine, so someone's dead, it implies not reincarnation, but reanimation. And there is a difference.
Yeah, it's a little dead. It's like in Princess Bride. He's a little
reincarnation, dead. We like to think about it as this frou-frou spiritual thing, coming from a culture where they're, again, you see that they were doing, outside of all the other weird surgeries we could talk, they were doing cataract surgeries in the Gupta dynasty. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Reliably.
Yeah, they use lenses.
Doctors were willing to do it.
Okay? Yeah.
And so the idea that they wouldn't be able to advance medicine to the extent of being able to understand blood transfusions. And there's something called, I brought this up once before, it's called the triad of death. In American pop culture, organized crime history, that refers to an ethnic, group that's been labeled and demonized. But the triad of death originally, again, it's like these overlapping histories where it keeps you from looking in Google, all of a sudden won't even show you. It's about 3 different types. It's the acidity, the oxygenation, and some other thing in the blood that you can't just, if someone bleeds out, there's like a process for getting the blood back into them in a way where, it's like in Princess Bride, they're only like 80% dead. And like, if you do it the wrong way, they'll become all the way dead, or you can like reverse the 80% dead. But so there was a Pope for 7 months, and they brought him back.
Well, now I just want to harp on what you said, because I don't know if everyone knows how accurate what you're saying. It's absolutely important. The Sushruta is a medical compendium from the Ayurvedic period, 1000 BC or something like that. And it talks a lot about ancient medical procedures, including cataract surgeries, blood transfusion. It is my mom's a doctor. She's she has a copy of this book, and it's a gift that another doctor who died, who's like 120 years old at this point, would have been, gave to her when she was in medical school. And the book is probably from the 15th century as well, the copy of it. So, I mean, doctors love this book because it shows that the Western idea of medicine was really an outsider, and that there was so much going on in India that they were aware of plastic surgery, for instance. The Sushruta is the father of plastic surgery on account of these details. After war, you had to clean up your face,
rhinoplasty, because there were places that would cut off people's noses if they were adulterers. So then when they would travel as a show of mercy, and this is something that they've shown on Modern Discovery Channel, where they literally grow a new nose on your forehead and then twist it down. And
this is old. They were like, thank God they brought Indian doctors to the West so they could teach them how to grow noses today. I mean, it's crazy. I think this is really interesting that the West is so primitive and in so many ways.
But outside of the novelty factor or the controversial factor or gender bending effects of it, so this idea of reanimation. So Houdini was famous for saying to his wife, I think, like, look, if anyone is going to be able to figure out how to come back from the dead and haunt someone, it's going to be me, and I'm going to haunt you. And that way we'll know that there is an afterlife and ghosts are real. Because they had all these like spirit detectors and, ghost listening devices. Because this was at the same time that people weren't aware of audio transmission technology. That was like Tesla thought he was listening to aliens because Marconi was messing with him, or But so reanimating and being Houdini and coming back. So imagine
Give
you're
about 30 seconds to finish this before I play box.
Yeah, 15. So if you're a doctor and you figure out how to inject yourself with something, that means you don't need to breathe anymore. And maybe it's like a time release pill or capsule. You really figure it out where you can put something up that's like a tube that like for like 7 months will continue to like a birth control time release. And the only way anyone will believe you is if you actually play dead and insist that they bury you and then dig you up and then shock you with electricity, and you'll pretend that that's what woke you up. And you're going, no, I had no vital signs, but like, no, it's like, this is how I meditate or
Box Saga. I like where the graphics are going.
So who'd you steal that from?
Nobody. Oh, well, you know, I think AI is stealing from everybody is what the artist is saying now.
What the frick did you just do? Like, friggin' whole wow.
With the Fandango.
Mos Def eventually released an album that he only performed live for people. And like, he was my favorite artist growing up, and I was like angry at him. But at the same time, now I get it. Because outside of how do we promote art like that? Or how do you best experience artwork like that? Because when I was like Fellini's Satyricon or City of Women, thinking back, like somehow I don't get that stoned anymore. And it's not the weed. There was just something about the first time being intoxicated and giving yourself over. You're not suspending disbelief to like follow along with a fairy tale. You're just caught up as the main character in this like cyclical, episodic, experiential, and the movie purposefully turns your perceptions upside down with light colors, and the idea that you're witnessing something and that you can't even describe the series. So, in speaking of trying to describe something, so on your Instagram there's a figure 8 loop.
Oh yeah.
What do you think of the idea of asking AI? Because again, you have to train it. Is please describe the subject matter of this picture.
Oh, you can do that now.
Outside of trying to name it or title it.
Where's the figure 8? This one you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this one, let's take it real quick and see if I can. God, I can't. Can I? How do I just copy my own picture? Oh, Instagram, you fool! You've made it difficult.
You know, Netflix has blocked screenshots. Did you know that?
Really?
Think about that technology. I think that's the only reason.
Oh Netflix man, that's why I don't want the Oculus or the Apple thing. No screenshots. Because imagine like you're living in that thing and you can't record like experiences you're having. Like if I'm watching a movie and that's the only thing in my head, fair use should suggest that this is my day's experience and I have a right to my experiences. I can't wait to see the laws change on copyright.
In Interstellar, he sends messages like forward and back through the Tesseract in time by trying to interact with things. When I see something, instead of just taking a screenshot, I'll take 3. And it's like a binary signal that it's like, if I'm going to go through this quickly, I'll sort those ones to the top if I want to find the most interesting or relevant or odd ones. But
I gotta like really blast my Instagram more, I guess.
check the comments.
So
I
sick
made
of seeing snowmen.
So the snake in the sky that you had there.
That's the more recent one, right? Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I made a series of comments on it. So we have, what does it say? It says,
Snack Ghost, where's the beef salsa made? New York City. Sing Hoser.
Oh, no, so there's a certain order to it. Let's see. It said
Shine Jose. I mean San Jose. I wrote it bottom to top. I did right.
Yeah. It didn't get them in order. I put them in. It was supposed to say Sing Hoser because you get a campfire and it looks kind of Canadian. And it's like,
yeah.
Okay, but then instead of Sing Hoser, what I meant to say was let's see. It was San Jose because that does look like it.
God, trying to explain jokes is really like
a festival in San Jose, and then it was
for the asylum, like.
But it was a shiny hose in the sky. There's a hose which is a death noodle snake, and it shine has and
I liked this one. So sick of snowmen. #woke. I think we need to start focusing on integration more. Psychic terminators.
If that thing had nipples, would they be allowed to be freed on Instagram?
I got a subject on that, like vein of reality. I wrote this. I'm against Law and Order. Let me give you the context. So, Adam Krigler,
TV show, me too.
Beautiful man said, yeah, right. He says, I don't know anyone who is down to microchip their brains. Okay, maybe Andreas Xirtus. And so then he's making this meme from iHypocrite. Let's make more vaccines. No, you'll put the microchips in our bodies and track us. Elon Musk. I will literally put a microchip in your brain. LMAO, nice. So people Where does
he shout you out?
No, he's above it. He's like right here. He says maybe Andreas Xirtus would be down.
It goes the Krigs a lot. Yeah.
The Krigs. And so for a little more context for that, where is the thing here? I posted this a week ago. No. Where is it?
Well, it's like you're that guy that he can make that joke about, and he knows that even if it like makes you butthurt to make it, use a bad expression. Again, he's pretty lewd and his double entendre and innuendo, but not that I mind. But if he's listening, maybe he'll appreciate the humor. That's all. The idea though that he's calling you out because you might have an interesting commentary or take.
No, he's not calling me on a bad way. I think he's saying like only a complete weirdo, and of course my dear friend Andreas Xirtus would consider doing this, and I think he's not wrong. I think but I'm trying to find the post I did. Where is it, Ming? I put it somewhere. Oh, I'm so annoyed. Okay.
Yeah, I can't tell if everyone that's got AI art as part of their social media thing, because it's the most fascinating, interesting thing about them. For all you know, they're just getting that stuff for free and paying for it off of Fiverr, and then claiming that they make it, and it makes you the most interesting person in the world.
If you copy my art, then that's fine. That's a meme. So, but Johnny, from Johnny Woodward, as you know, from Rogan and Sam Tripoli, and Johnny. I posted.
Says all the time, Johnny.
He posted a bunch of cool stuff about phones recently, and I was lamenting about how cool Super Bowl commercials used to be, and I was remembering this Super Bowl commercial, which I'm just going to show you. From 2012 or something like that. It's like an Asian guy who sold everything and he's like super poor, and he comes to this dirty warehouse place. I remember this during Super Bowl. He comes in, he sees a bunch of people that are doing surgeries, right? And people are having their thumbs removed. They're selling their thumbs. And the thumbs are being sewn onto.
Well, they're trading thumbs to practice digit surgery, but no, actually, that's clearly not what's
straight up. This is a commercial about taking people's thumbs from Southeast Asia, like who are selling them because they have nothing, and
if you don't speak the same language,
them on to the Android,
and you're stuck in the room and you need to teach everyone how to do surgery, the first thing you do is you cut off both of your thumbs and you switch them. And everyone's going, what the fuck are you doing? You have enough patience and dexterity and pain numbing and expertise that you watch in front of everyone. This is how we learn, people. And again, you can now do it to each other if you want, or you can choose to all shut up and get along and stop fighting about who gets the first fucking piece of bread every day. Thanks.
You get two. Those are your two Fs. All right, but look at that. That's a messed up commercial, isn't it? And so the point is, this was a Super Bowl commercial. Super Bowl is about to happen again. People are talking about Elon Musk's Neuralink and how it's only going to be used at first for amputees. And I'm thinking about people amputating their thumbs for Android a few days before this comes out. This is what is to come, right? And then so somebody said the whole point of this argument was this part here. They say, you know, if Elon Musk can cyborg people back to physical ability and high quality life, I'm all for it. But there needs to be constitutional laws to prevent it becoming a method of dystopian authoritarian control. Sorry.
Yeah, the Constitution, as long as we change the words on that piece of paper, it fixes everything.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's make laws against drugs, sex, you know.
Well, so here's the large
guns.
scale. If you want to take the bird's eye view, the holographic view. So Vice did publish like a hour-long special about a guy who was suicidal, and he found a doctor who agreed to implant some electrodes kind of deep into his brain for the stimulation.
Isn't that
3
great?
wires going through. And when I was watching this, I thought it was like one of these kind of false, you know, they do like child predator sting operations, and there's someone who's pretending to do it because everyone's supposed to, like, if someone is looking for that stuff online, one hopes that someone will find them and, you know, take care of that, I guess. In the same way, when someone pretends that there's a doctor who's willing to do this, everyone is supposed to go now use that doctor as a precedent, maybe just litigiously, and set up that line in the sand, whether it's in the Constitution or in the sand. You know, culturally, even philosophically, we're at the point now where it's like a cool accessory, and it's not just in your wrist, it's not just on you or in your pocket or up your butt, and you know, it's like chess pieces, this, that, or that, but it's now in your brain. And so when you invade Ukraine, it means world war, because there's a get outside of the whole Caesar being like, you know, in or out of fashion or not when it comes to, you know, birthing methods. When you've invaded Ukraine and you admit it, and people then, you know, we're making programs and studying it now, 250 people at a time, as though that's, because philosophically and scientifically, if you understand statistics and math and that, whatever focus group you're doing isn't going to lead to any definitive proof that anyone can hang their hat on enough to then do it again in a better way, really. The fact that we were able to isolate all the metals we have aren't glowing and our glass isn't radioactive anymore, you know, it was pretty cool, because again, people used to die at 40 probably because they were blind and radioactive, because it was like cool to have all this glowy stuff, you know.
You know about blinding, Stu? So like if you ever had a perpetual blinding, Stu, so forever pot, hunter's pot, like this is some people's parents, not going to say which people's parents do this, where they just leave a stove going all the time, and you could have a stove going for 20 years. You could just keep boiling it, and you keep adding stuff to it, and you don't let it go refrigerated. And I mean,
Action Bronson did an episode of the show called "Fuck That's Delicious." Sorry, I could have edited that F-bomb. Sorry, but
for the love of Pete,
mute me. No, but okay. when he went into a place, the au jus sauce was a 40-year-old. It wasn't, because you can't never change the oil, because the oil burns. You have to keep putting. But there was a certain type of like. It's called like the mother culture for sourdough or something. Or
the half a dozen churchgoers that I've seen watch my show have all told me they don't care about cursing nearly as much as I do, which I find interesting. That I have some sort of weird thing about cursing. I should get a therapist, I guess. But,
snippets and clips. Snippets and clips. Sorry.
Perpetual stew, though, it used to be called blinding stew, because sometimes what you do is you'd have to throw some stuff in there.
Oh, okay.
You'd have to put some stuff in there to blind your, you'd have to blind your guests if they were, if they were bad. You'd put some stuff in there.
Well, there's nothing really too bad about an overcooked potato or an overcooked starch, but there's a lot of root vegetables and stuff that you have to cook them for a long time to.
And you never let me finish my point.
Heating actually changes the chemical nature of the carbohydrates.
Become a raw foodist, Stefan. So here's the thing. If this whole constitutional law thing, and then May says from Canada, but you are okay with Musk working through all the steps before laws are in place? And then I say, I'm against law and order. And then Fractal Grid says sad, which I can only imagine I don't know, but because I feel like I've seen them before. Maybe they hate me now that I said that. But am I wrong here? Like law and order, like doesn't mean the same thing to me that it does.
What you say, Andreas? I think again, some people are polarizing that way. If anything, they just didn't think it was funny. I'm against, because you're clearly making a reductive, obtuse statement that in certain situations might be true and in certain situations might be completely not true.
Bro,
as
I just am quoting Malcolm X from his 6-year prison debate against Princeton, I think. And I mean, paraphrasing at least. When we live in a system where justice is impossible because of improprieties taken by the state, corporations, because justice is an inverse concept in America and in Western legal system. Justice is designed to protect the guilty from having too much punishment extracted, right? Let's say some kid flips you off while you're driving down the road. If you run him over, that's injustice, right? If that kid gets a fine or if he has some sort of trouble that's within the letter of the law, it's to protect that child because that child has committed what might be considered a public offense, right? Something that's offended.
Okay, but what if you're now in the border and it's that child and you're guarding your tent and your cooking fire and your livestock with a gun, and anything that moves at night, you kill it?
Bruce is like, stop, please. So I don't know. I feel, here's the thing. Law and Order is the new world.
And it's automated. It's literally like a computer program you set up so you can actually sleep, and it's a laser, you know, it's like,
isn't it the New World Order? Like, what do you say? What do you say about somebody who thinks Law and Order means Law and Order still, and they don't understand that it really means criminal injustice of, you know, a corrupt legal system? What do you do?
Well, that's the one semi-serious and somber point. Getting to like modern events or the legal. So behind me, you brought up Malcolm X, and I would like to hear. He had a 6-year story where he wrote, well, because John Forte went to jail for having like a gallon of liquid cocaine, and he became a lawyer and getting qualified to do something and act in a certain way as well. But actually taking that time to formulate and we've been given this gift of English, which fits a lot of the same grammatical regularities as Sanskrit. It's this organization of thinking that if you use that type of thinking, you can apply it even to the basic elements of nature and organize it into the same type of up, down, left, right, diagonal. But so this says, my home is in my head. And one of the very kind of, I guess, 3 or 4 times I've really just gone on a walkabout. I got that when I was in Switzerland. And so for someone who does make it across the border, and someone who does make it and gets resources and maybe meets up with family and already has a girlfriend and maybe a family on the way, but they still feel like they're a fugitive or that they're a refugee or that they're being given shelter or they're being given quarter and that they don't deserve what they have and that there's some system that's going to run out or they're eventually going to be somehow put back into the cast of untouchables or being on the outside of what they feel of that circle of love, of community.
This reminds me of Malcolm X again, because I'm sorry, did you guys watch, like, it's Black History Month, you go to Disney, there's Genius, MLK and Malcolm X on the Disney Channel. And I would normally say, hey, don't watch anything that's propaganda, but I love Malcolm X so much, I wanted to give it a shot. And when I did, I was really grateful I did. Actually, it's a really great episode. I mean, I get that they're really hyper sympathetic to Martin Luther King, and I think that's an injustice because he's not a perfect person. But I get why, and looking at what they say about Malcolm X is just incredible. And if you think about what it's like to be a boy raised to believe in a white Jesus with burning crucifixes around you as your father is murdered in front of you and your mother is taken away to a mental institution, your mother who speaks 4, 5, 6 languages, French, Creole, English, Spanish. I mean, his mother was a genius, right? And so to be told, you're never going to be able to be part of this white Jesus cult, and the white Jesus cult burned down your home and put the white fiery crucifix in front of you, it's, of course, he's never going to be able to be a part of that community. He's never going to feel like welcome to that community ever again. And so, of course, he's going to go to the diametric opposite. And luckily for him, in prison, he found Islam because he was called Satan when he first got to prison. He's essentially as close to a Satanist as you could have been in the 30s.
Well,
right?
It's like the ship of tea. If you go to a sports game and someone calls me a KIKE, does that mean that I can never go to a sports game again and feel like I belong or that I'm allowed to be there? I don't know.
I feel like if your mother and father were murdered in front of you and they had like a giant, like, burning kite, it'd something probably be a little bit more, that's the thing. I think Malcolm X was weak man.
You're saying that in addition to the burning cross, there was the homicide of both of his parents, or regicide.
Well, the homicide of his father, he was killed on train tracks, and his mother went insane. and was committed to a mental institution. I don't know if she fully went insane before she was taken away or after they realized they couldn't arrest her because she was too smart. Like, she'd go to these courthouses and she was educated and she could speak multiple languages. And so they figured the easiest thing to do with a woman who talks too much was to have her committed. So Malcolm X had to go through that.
Man has always been in a fight with Zeus. You trace it all the way back, and it seems that outside of the sun god, the one that has it out for man and really has our number is Zeus, right? So man can build a blimp, a plane, a train, an automobile. The closer to Earth and more like grounding or rubber tires you have, the less likely that Zeus is going to come out of nowhere and because if you're a blimp, like St. Elmo's fire starts shooting off of wooden bolts.
Hypothetically, if you were a pimp on a blimp. Sorry.
And so the lightning sometimes comes up from out of the water, and the water glows for a second because it's like semi-radioactive, and then so Zeus, you think it's a weapon. It's like every time you build a blimp and you launch it, and you're like, "Bye, King." It's like, "Good luck. We're gonna follow you in 100 years." Within eyesight, inevitably, there's and even if you stay still, the air moves over you and creates, and eventually your city gets hit with, And so anything that has a gas tank that's vulnerable to that type of so like the idea of a sacrificeless sacrifice, so that doesn't involve the death of something. So the story of Abraham sacrificing his son and then deciding not, so like the quartz inside of a wristwatch makes it, it resonates, it uses the crystal but it doesn't consume it, right? But it's a part of it. Without
There's
it,
electricity flickering through. It's a quartz crystal clock, right? Yeah. Have you heard of the House of David? I was going to do this earlier, but have you heard of the House of David?
I'd make a dad joke here, but is it a movie? Yep. Are we talking about a religion? What are we looking at?
Bruh, yes. It's a movie we're going to make about a religion that was a commune. It's like my new obsession. So, move over Mormonism, come in House of David. No, I'm just kidding. But they're pretty cool. Look at these guys. Look at their long hair. Let me just, before I tell you anything about them.
Wow.
Check out their hair. Let me go a little further. House of David played baseball.
They got manes.
They weren't allowed to cut their hair. They weren't allowed to shave because they thought to get into heaven, you had to be like Samson. Like Samson doesn't cut his hair, and you had to follow like Jesus and everything. And they were the best white baseball players in America.
So is that heresy? Is because if you remove the hair and you can see your face, it's like not humble to God, or
it's unsuited of you.
Alexander II, the guy who had the Emancipation Manifesto that freed the serfs in Russia, was missing the beard from. He had like a very distinctive style of his beard where his chin was bald, but he had like giant mutton chops and a big mustache, and other people would then copy that hairstyle as a way to kind of
look how happy these guys are.
Of freeing serfs and treating everybody equally. And in certain places, that hairstyle would get you in trouble. In other places, it would mean that you were welcome, even if you were a stranger, because you were willing to just like rock the bald chin and the giant mutton chops and the big mustache. And it meant that you obviously saw the diagrams of and heard the word about Alexander II, the Tsar over in Russia, who was writing this Emancipation Manifesto that eventually turned into the Emancipation Proclamation.
Are these literally women? Because I think they're not. I think they're supposed to be just young men over here. These must be like teenage boys. I mean, they look like women to me, essentially.
See, here's the thing is, like in the olden days, when you would have literally people living in the woods, like stealing women sometimes. So if all you had to do to survive a certain season of the year was to inject some like weird, like you need to have a brow ridge, you like modify your appearance when you're in public so you look ugly, you put a wart on your nose, and so then everyone just treats you a certain way and you can participate in society, whereas if you were a beautiful woman, you might be a target. And so then when you go home is when you take the wart off the nose and you stand up straight. And
so that's the thing. I would have thought all that, but the House of David, super weird group. So basically it starts out with this guy named Benjamin Purnell. I mean, he's already following in the suit of previous women and men who said they were the messengers of the sixth messenger, the fifth messenger. He said, Benjamin Purnell said he was the seventh messenger, and he got a bunch of people to show up right around Michigan, South Michigan, right here, which is interesting because up north and stuff, and this whole area in Michigan's where the Strangites went, and the Strangites were a group of Mormons that broke off when Brigham Young went to Utah. They stayed, and
Who were
the
they named
Strangites.
after? Strangites?
Yeah, the Strangites are interesting because they're named after James Strang. And James Strang was the guy who supposedly had the actual right to start the next church. Like he was supposed to be the new
dude, if you can
minister
make those
until-
AI animations, though, how do I know you didn't just add this to Wikipedia and like 15 different websites?
Good
know?
question. I think the way you do that is you go to revision history and you can actually
But
see.
so wait, why are we zeroing in on this instead of me just
So-
believing what Wikipedia is?
this is kind of
I've never heard of this. Yeah.
the strange. So at the time that Joseph Smith was murdered, there's a bunch of different people that were going off different directions, and we all know Brigham Young went to Utah and built the Mormon Church, as we refer to it. But there were other groups, and the Bickertonites are one. James Strang was the guy who literally had a letter saying Joseph Smith made him the new prophet. So he had, to a lot of people, it looked like it might have been a forgery, but he made it look like he was the guy to be in charge. And so a huge number of people did not go to Utah, and they followed Strang, and Strang took them to Wisconsin and to Michigan. And the problem was in Michigan, they got kidnapped. People would in the night come and grab Strangites, and they would put them on boats. And then they would take them miles and miles and hundreds of miles away and drop them off in random places. So they literally just would destroy their communities and not let them.
That's why I thought the Twitter hashtag about teach kids to code was a joke about child trafficking, because admitting you know how to code means that you're subject to someone needing those skills. In the olden days, instead of like going on monster.com or hiring someone off of Craigslist, you would just be like, the guy in those costumes apparently interacts with that machine, and our machine's broken. So we're going to we've got we just instead of hitting him over the head, we send a beautiful
Monster.com is still a thing.
Powder in his face, and
I haven't thought about monster.com for jobs since 2002. That's crazy.
Add money, please.
I remember when this thing started. Oh, dude, that's crazy. All right. So,
well, no, but so because on the farm you would have a bell, and you would ring it for dinner, and then a different signal for when there's a storm coming. And you can set up a chain of people instead of settling in different camps. You would string you would be part of a human chain, and until the technology existed where you could send it more remotely. I'm eating CBD Keef, by the way. Isn't that an interesting body might convert a little bit of it to Delta 9, but CBD Keef. And so on farms, the idea that you would
you'd have a bell, and you'd have a wire. You might have like a clothing line with a bell, and it might go several miles through trees. And there's ways of, I've seen, this is great. The Strangites had all this sort of thing. The problem was by 1860s when the reorganized church, because the thing was Joseph Smith wanted his son to be the leader, but he was a baby. So you got Brigham, you got Strangites, and they're waiting until Joseph Smith III is old enough. And then, so a lot of the people that could join the RLDS, which is a reorganized church, with him, and they leave the Strangites, but not everybody. And I think what you find is a lot of the Strangites, because they get disconnected from Strangite, they just become cult folk Christian. And a lot of those people end up in what's this group that moves there called the House of David. Now, it's not just them, because Benjamin Purnell ends up coming from the East Coast, and he's taking boats, and he ends up getting these guys from Australia. I think like 300 Australians.
Go back to those mini.
I will. It's all part of this. This is why this thing blows. This is why this blows my mind. So they hire these musicians, basically. Well, not hire them, but they ask for people to join the House of David, and like 300 dudes and women off a boat from Australia show up, who are the greatest musicians, most famous musicians of Australia at that time. Big vaudeville names, right? Celebrity endorsement. And all of a sudden, the House of David's famous. No one remembers this, but at the time, this was the most famous group in America, famous to everybody.
But there's an anonymity to it. Do you see that? Because in India, the tradition is that your name is 18 syllables long in 4 different words, and then you follow that with 15 different 8 different syllable descriptors about where, when, and who you're from. And what you do, and literally to introduce to say you're from the House of David is like saying my name's Joe Smith.
Right. Well, the House of David, they eventually, the thing
what was Joseph Smith? Right.
Saint Joseph. There you go. But
and the idea is that you make a man. You take
the
them out of
the
nowhere and
Americans,
you give
the
them an
Americans,
identity.
the Americans totally did that because they looked at this group of bearded people and they interacted with them because they played baseball, which was the American pastime, and they were the best baseball team in America. And because they refused to shave, they couldn't play in the major leagues. So the Negro League invited them to play, and they used to play with black teams even before there was segregation. Yeah, no, these guys are amazing. There's everything about these guys are amazing. And so not only do they have
I'd say
musicians,
also kudos to the organizers and the participants in the Negro Leagues for not just like luring them and then kicking their ass, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the other. House of David and the Monarchs played a lot of games. Let me see if I can find
Sorry, I watched the movie The Black Klansman with Darren Glover. What was Daniel Glover, where it's kind of about false flag race relation operations, but yeah.
They play. I can't find the flyer right now, but if you look,
by the way, someone stole a statue of Jackie Robinson.
Oh, really? That's weird. Well, so even before Jackie Robinson, if you start looking into the House of David and Monarch, like they would travel and play with the black teams, and so they did this before there was segregation. They did this during segregation, and by the time Robinson shows up, they've played thousands of games all across America. And people loved them because they knew
Jackie's significance was he went into the lion's nest as the first person where all the people that thought it was still acceptable to even in a funny way because again they call out their friends that look that way the same way and it's fine, but when you do it to a stranger and you do it en masse and that's all, you realize that person just walks around eating negativity all the time outside of what it's rooted in. It's just this vitriol directed at someone for something that is
no one had any concerns like that with the House of David because these guys were equalists. They were vegetarians. They didn't drink. They didn't smoke. So if you had a baseball team come into your town, a lot of time they drink, smoke, and have sex with all your women, right? Here's a team that when they come to your town, they're going to be cool.
Afford it. Sorry.
Well, these guys could afford it too. They had tons of money. That's the other thing. So not only were they great at music, but you had engineers who came with them. And so
you're saying they showed up, they paid to sleep with the local floozies that we all get to fuck for free, and they didn't steal all of our weed on the way out. These guys are fucking gems.
That's exactly how it happened. And then what they did was they started building, they had all these engineers with them, and they had this huge compound where they had their own food, and it was before
it looks like these guys were investors. I don't think they were paying the prostitutes. I think that they were like giving them money to hold because
I'm about to tell you the one bad thing about the House of David and the reason why you don't hear about the House of David. They were celibate. None of these guys were allowed to have children, relationships. Apparently, there's not a lot of talk about sex scandals up until the very end where there's a bunch of really false sounding accusations.
Now does celibate mean you can't jerk off either?
I'm pretty sure that they were completely
or Jill off.
It's a silly question, but it's a serious question. I actually wonder
if you blow that tuba close enough to a girl's hoo-ha,
Infertility 19th century. When you start looking, and we've talked about this before,
vibration isolation on those old cars wasn't quite what it is today.
Mind Unveiled, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, at some point soon, but this has been an important thing, is the 19th century infertility levels were peaking. We had a crazy amount of infertility rates in the 19th century, and the idea that there were just tons of people that could not breed, that maybe had something else, like if you had mumps as a child, or there could be something that happened to these people that they're not.
What did Bob Barker say at the end of every one of his shows? Spay and neuter your orphans. I mean, farm animals,
That's right. That's right. Well, so bad thing there, in my opinion. Being celibate is a bad thing because that's why
they look perfectly healthy. It doesn't look like there was something in the water that affected their hormonal development or balance or ability to form.
Unless when they were when they're all babies, right? These are all guys, you leave your family, you join this organization, you grow your hair out, you play baseball, you have all this pastime, you're making music, you're making art. Engineers are joining them.
Money, yeah, they look,
They're doing all right. That's the craziest part. We're about to get to that point because look at the house and you start to look at the Victorian houses and everything like that. And then all of a sudden a train, the train across America, a train stop is only 50 miles away from them. And so curiosity tourists start to show up at the House of David. And this is right around the time of the the Great World's Fair, the Chicago Great World's Fair. So people are looking for things like this, and they design the world's first American amusement park.
Speaking of design, those other uniforms right there, those are a little lacking,
Yeah, well, you get early days.
Back to the drawing board.
But if you look up in the old postcards and you start looking at these amazing pictures, and you're like, wait a second, this is crazy. They have these trains that are these tiny trains, this giant stage. They have basically what happened was people were showing up too often, and so they realized
red and white pole stripe meant what?
The maypole, I would imagine, with Noah's Ark here. I mean, granted, it's been recolored, so I can't be sure.
Noah's Ark.
Yeah. But there was a lot of things going on. Also, there was a beer garden. So these guys who don't drink or smoke or eat meat or anything, they were working and selling brewed beer. They were brewers too. So they were making tons of money. And look at this picture right here of the bumper cars. Now, again, this is all like the 20s, 1904. This is 50 years before Disneyland. And you can look up Disney House of David, and you can see what happened was Walt Disney literally came to this amusement park, as did about 100 million people. 100 million people in America visited House of David Commune. That's crazy. Just to think about how we don't know about this place at all anymore. And it used to be the most popular place in America to go.
It almost seems as though Disney's grandiose vision was well aligned with the capacity and traffic and demand for a traveling, touring destination that was kind of welcoming, come one, come all, and offered a variety of
Walt Disney bought
and kind of shrink the world down to size so that you could experience it all at once. And
Walt Disney bought their train
instead of picking one place to be. Or
Walt Disney bought one of their trains in 1930s or 40s, and he brought it back and he had it at his house for about 10 years. The park eventually, there was, when the prophet of their church, died, the messenger of their church died, he was supposed to be immortal, and this idea was they were building a paradise that they were going to go directly to heaven. The fact that their prophet died proved he wasn't immortal, and that had some problems for their church. So
what if you thought it was a steam train and it was like such a well-built thing that you never had to fix it? And then one day when you decommissioned it and took it apart, you realized that inside was actually like cesium or like some other exotic material that was pretty much functioning around the same way that a steam engine or an alcohol engine would work. But
look at this picture here, and you're like talking about
that the whole time, huh?
We're talking about miniaturization. Oh, look at this miniaturization. It's not miniature. He's literally
people used to be that big.
He just bought it this way. Yeah, people used to be that. He just bought it the way it was. And so I find that really interesting is that Disneyland.
And again, it's like there are communities of smaller people. So someone has to build a prototype as a novelty device so that if, it's one thing to like share the technology of flat screens and computers, but I've never seen a kitchen designed well for.
There's another interesting aspect to this story because the prohibition was going on while they were making beer. And so Al Capone was a regular in the House of David. And it's been pretty well confirmed that they were selling their beer during the prohibition through Al Capone. He had them set up to make the stuff, and they'd get it on the train and then they'd take it out. And as soon as, I think within a day, like the first place to sell beer legally in Michigan was the House of David. They were ready to go. So they clearly had a speakeasy already existing at that time. And Al Capone used to love to bring his friends, and they would get on the train. They get on this toy train, and they would actually ask the guys, because a lot of time the guys would put their hair in a bun so that the tourists wouldn't grab their ponytails. He would pay them extra to not wear their hat so he could see their ponytails. He thought, how cool is it these guys have these long ponytails? How great is it? So Al Capone apparently really loved.
See, America was known for snake oil salesmen who would, by hook or by crook, find a way to kind of get over on individuals that were fish out of water. Whereas the perception of the rest of the world is there might be like wise and powerful people that will manipulate and control things. And yet America was kind of uniquely known for this, like, not screw your neighbor, but like, it's not no new friends. It was just, instead of, it's like shaking the hands, gentlemen, this is a robbery, so to speak. And you can't tell if someone's getting, are NFTs even a real thing or crypto? But when it comes to the veracity of, and in the integrity of a tourist destination, again, that's where the Knights Hospitalier at times have been driven out of places. And maybe that was to drive them into the arms of other people that kind of really benefited and aligned with the philosophy. And
this is the perfect cult for me. I know that Curtis just said, damn, I want a cult of Tards. I hope he meant Tartarians. But when you look at this place and you see what they were building, they're like, hey, guys, we're going to build a farm. It's going to be an amusing life for the rest of time. People are going to come here and see how they can live better than they do back home. This will model a betterment of civilization, and the world could see it. And the thing is that today, Disneyland, the best aspects of Disneyland, because it's not perfect, the best pure are this place when it was pure. I mean, this is a perfect working paradise.
Yeah, and get this to extrapolate on that analogy macrocosmically. Instead of the eye of a needle and everything having, you have to pass through customs. So it's like, I'm only importing one train car, but it's got 12 wheels on it and it's built like Fort Knox. And when I get it here, I'm going to take it apart and build 12 train cars out of it.
Right. I mean, that's what he did.
But at Disney, what they did, instead of having everyone pass through the eye of a wormhole, it's Epcot, and you go up and inside, and you know, it's like from Idiocracy. You see how the Tyrannosaurus Rex came in and un-Nazi'd the world, and I thought that was a joke, but the denazification apparently was like and denazified and
denazi'd the world.
Sprinkle a little holy water on it, it's fine, you know.
Yeah. The thing about this group I find really interesting, just the fact that they were so many people from around the world that were engineers and like the fact that they could go to reverse engineer something. They could, all these guys would take something like a tractor and then they would copy it. They would take it apart, put it back together. All the steam engine stuff for their train.
Maybe that's what the orphan trains were. Maybe
these guys get orphan trains
outside of the tragedy and the rough and tumble lifestyle, is that the only people that knew how to run and clean every single part of that train. It was like not in the Willy Wonka's Snowpiercer, which was supposedly a semi-sequel to Willy Wonka, but are the kids. And without again, there's no adults. There's the conductor is there going, chew fucking chew. I mean, I hate go and the light says, and you know, like Harriet Tubman.
And they're
literally the kids, every single square inch of this thing. If they needed a new one too, 4 of them will go off and they'll go and get a new piece. Or, you know.
And those kids are infertile. So you have a generation of kids that grow up to be the only ones who know how to run that thing. Right. And so that's the real tragedy.
Nikola Tesla said even giving your love to a woman he would use that inventor obsessive mindset and apply it to a relationship and a family, and it would rob his craft and his contributions.
I mean, just the fact though that they could reverse engineer these things and that they built this amazing society from the 1890s until the 40s, even the 70s, there were members of this organization that existed. That blows my mind that this thing could have existed. And the problem with it is that since they didn't have kids, it was not sustainable. So this amazing giant thing.
Were they not allowed to adopt?
I mean, Shakers, I think they can adopt. Yeah. But
it was more the community that would adopt as opposed to individual couples.
After Benjamin Purnell, their messenger, died, his wife and the lawyer of the group kind of split. And so there was the other thing was there was just the House of David was this huge compound.
But when you have these guys around, like, so there was a famous baseball player back who was a pitcher, and anytime a fire truck went by the stadium, biggest game of the season, he's on the mound, bottom of the ninth, he runs off the mound as soon as he hears the siren. Doesn't matter if it's his locals, and then he died of like exposure because he was helping for like 3 weeks dig out of a flood and a blizzard and all that. And so he was always confused as to why everyone else in the stadium wasn't also running to like where the friggin' problem clearly was. And again, outside of being a baseball, so you have these guys around, and when you ring a certain bell, they will muster and marshal, and then, you know, and even just in the name of entertainment or in the name of captivating
or the worry. So at the end,
people around something that's not war, that's not politics, and it's
at the end of Benjamin Purnell's life, there were bells, and his house is like the Winchester Mystery House. They recently did fix up his house, and he's got secret rooms going in and out of every direction, right? So there's all these questions people were saying, but the thing is, because he worked with Al Capone, and because, you know, at the end of his life, there was like 13 women that they tried to make like sexual allegations about this guy because he's supposed to be so pure. None of it's proven. None of it went to trial. The only thing that went to trial was the idea that he, this might be circumstantial evidence that he's a religious fraud or something like that. And they were trying to say this was a religious nuisance because the dude was about to die and they wanted it. I mean, this is a huge piece of property and it's making millions of dollars in the 30s and 40s. So this is like crazy amount, like $52 million that they had in like 1928 or something like that. And or in the 40s even, so after the financial crash. So they're trying to cut up the property into pieces. The houses go to one group, the amusement park kind of goes to another group. The wife ends up building something across the street for some of the original members to continue on, and then it all just kind of dissipates into nothing. It's super sad. But I mean, it's crazy when you think about how much this would have affected
preserving the traditions of brewing. There's a certain integrity of the process where you can't try to milk it for 5% extra because you're dipping into the angel's portion. The angel's portion is what's evaporates from the container that's pure, but it's the stuff at the margins of the distillation process that you literally have to pour back into the earth to some extent because it contains things that will make you go blind over time.
These Germanic brewers, they weren't going to forget these skills. I think that's kind of the other important thing. So the fact that they had a place that they were isolated, it wasn't offending anybody because they were inside of their compound. They were able to go on for scores and scores of years doing what they wanted to do. I mean,
well, there's the story of like the corn beer and banana beer, because bananas naturally contain enough bacteria that if you just put them in a big pot and mash them up within 24 hours, it is already
you'll have prison booze. Yeah, prison booze. Okay.
Right. And so it's
okay,
easy. It's like grog.
No.
And so you have a whole society or at least ritual or time of the year that's built around grog. And you acknowledge the grog and you accept the grog and you embody the grog. And even when you have a little extra energy, you drink some grog to remind yourself that it's grog time. And because it's either fiesta or siesta. And it's like siesta means like lockdown. And like, I'm just going to go ahead and stay put because everything seems a little crazy right now. And then
Jeremiah, hit me up and get me in touch with him. That looks good. Jason Archaics will be doing a live with my brother Logan of Decode Your Reality soon. You should jump in and contact Logan. Help me out with that. That sounds cool. Hit me up in the Tartary Nova Discord, and I would love to connect with anybody. That sounds great.
You've seen what Jason did with Martin Leakey?
No, did they do one? I had not seen that.
Well, Archaics, I think him and Campbell did like a whole road trip walkabout. And
oh, really?
They were filming little shorts and Instagram stories, or I don't know about Instagram.
I've been really busy. I gotta check it out. I'd love to though. That sounds really
cool. If I didn't love the Martin that is Martinness.
Martin's awesome.
Flat thumbs forever, thrice enough already. Just seeing how he handled and the observations he made and the way that his personality blended in with not only Jason at the house and the yard and the picnic table. They really shared. They gave a window into just a hangout, which outside of these one-on-one conversations, it's not that nice. It's like Martin has such a worldwide following. He's like one of the OSGists, so to speak.
OS of G's, yeah.
And he, as far as being shadow banned and just not really worrying about the fact that he would get 20,000 followers and then lose 20,000 followers. And then, it was only like his whole living and he's like finally about to make money on it and then they take it all away. And he would just like keep making awesome content that was exactly what it needed to be. And nothing more, nothing less. And yet he, someone like Jason and Archaics really approached it from a business standpoint and was able to really max out on a few things. And I think he did, pretty darn well for himself. And the fact that he's willing to admit that, again, some creators don't talk about money they do or don't make, but, he's the kind of guy that would definitely give advice. And outside of that, may have the resources even to be able to promote it and justify it as a business expense, to just like literally have like barbecues in his backyard and fly someone in to like all-stars who just hold down, center field, so to speak. And, yeah, so Jason from Archaics. Who was that comment from? He said his brother is
Jeremiah.
Going on with Jason.
Yeah, his brother's Logan, I think he said. I just want to say, just kind of close up my thoughts on the House of David. I think it's really an important thing to look at because this was an example of a group that became so famous because, granted, they're doing all these things kind of privately, but at the same time, they have a public amusement park. They're getting on boats, and they're going across the Mississippi 6,000 miles around the United States continent, preaching to all these different people and drafting people. So it got to the point where everybody in America, black or white, right, because of baseball, knew who the House of David was, and we don't anymore. So the fact that they got to the point where they were shut down, suppressed, their lands were divided up, a corporation took over the majority of the money.
Outside of skin color or religious persuasion or belief system or eye color, what might have singled these people out, this photo that you're looking at right now, as a truncation in the line of human breeding?
You know,
curly
what I mean?
hair.
You think so? What? No, they just look British. That's the thing. All these Australians and they're Celtic looking. Celts breed a lot. I don't think that it's necessarily a stereotype that Celts can't breed. I mean,
But I'm sure they're straight haired. What was interesting is I met someone, and again, just happened to notice they had this big bushy beard, and their beard was curlier than my short and curly, so to speak. You know, the ones on the back of your neck. But
it might be like a
hair
protein
on his head was like you know, what I would say is like a woman's hair, and it wasn't because of his. He just had very fine, straight hair and a big bushy beard, and it reminds me of the image of Jesus, and you know that is often depicted, and I didn't notice that is one of the distinctive characteristics of it, whereas they may have had equally bushy hair and beard, maybe not quite as tight a curl as certain ethnicities or lineages, but so there are children. My understanding is that there are babies that are born with blue eyes, okay, and then within 1 or 2 years they turn either hazel or brown, and so sometimes people are looking at baby photos of themselves and that like parents think that their child got like body swapped or something, but no, literally going from blue eyes as a child to, which they says to make it more
I had really green eyes, and they ended up brown or hazel, you know, but they're brown.
Yeah, mine are more green hazel than.
I got to work on my diet.
But
Everyone told me if I was like a perfect raw foodist, I'd have green eyes, you know.
In time of Sparta, and or in a time where they're literally breeding people as desirable physical with certain characteristics, you know, the baby pokes its head out and it has brown eyes, and you go, sorry. And it may be because you're from a place where that means that you were breeding with an outsider, or that's at least the perception, because they don't realize you're recessive, dominant, recombinatory. Who knows what that? But because clearly, it's like my father had blonde hair as a child, and then it all went brown, and then his beard still like dark maroon, the dark brown auburn, but his hair is kind of white gray now, and it's like over time. So where does that fit on the Punnett square? That's not brown hair. That's first blonde, and then at a certain age it happened, and that could be environmental exposure. But specifically as a call out to why we're the naked mole rat version of the giant.
So meta.
Beings from which we descended.
That's so meta.
You know who I possess, the you know why I place it, you know where I know it's why that does not care. Now it's you know who I possess, the you know why I place it, you know where I know it's why that does not care. Now it's you know who I possess, the you know why I place it, you know where I know it's why that does not care. Now it's you know who I possess, the you know why I place it, you know where I know it's why that does not care. Art thou ready, immortals for the innovation so fresh. Stand and confess that tomorrow is but a fanciful mesh. This is the innovation, stand and acknowledge. Understand we not dead. Wish we had this is the innovation, stand and acknowledge. Little meta.
Sorry, I feel better now.
Man.
I love where these AI things are going, man.
So it's one thing, because I have another social media connection with someone who's on the Alex Stein show, or was one of the, it was
Calix,
White
how dare
He's
you?
doing-
How could you pretend this song wasn't made by me? Shame on you.
But he's doing like a few frames of an actor and like making them like move like a GIF almost, but it's AI. Where so what I'm seeing there, and again I had to write. So I'm seeing that you've taught the computer to kind of improvise and hallucinate and even pretend and deceive with trompe-l'oeil visuals where this becomes that and perceptually. So there's a framework which you're building upon, and then you're telling it to continue to iterate, and somehow it creates a cohesive visual narrative of some sort. And you're not the only person doing it, but the idea that someone else sees that and says it's AI art and tries to discount
I know
the amount of understanding, again, like, okay, you want to tweak it. It's like, in what direction? It's like, what the frick would that even mean to someone like me? I mean,
what I find funny is like how much control I actually have, because I started realizing I was like, AI is not dumb. I'm dumb. I could talk to AI better, and AI would understand me better. If I were to say to
let
it,
me make a clips channel.
if I make
and
a
I'll
song,
give all the revenue to charity or back to you. But like, what about just like gallery style? And again, installation artwork, architecture school. That was what it's about: installing something in a space that's going to be there temporarily that you experience by walking.
Yeah, amusement park for 100 years. We're working on it. Extra.
Because imagine if you teach it to then freestyle to the extent where it takes the transcription of what you and I say for 5 minutes and then makes something instantly. Is this what you guys were talking about?
I'm glad that you figured that. That's exactly where I'm going with this. So there's a couple of things. First off, I can write freestyle.
That essentially is right.
And it will write that. The other thing is the control, though. So I can say, I want to hear this in F major. I can do things like that. I can say saxophone solo, but in F major saxophone solo. People don't understand. Like, I just did this the other day. There's no words to this. I just made this with like.
Definitely in the end of the.
Yeah, it's like.
Where's she?
I mean, all right.
She probably just offended it 3 times, or
it depends on what you're trying to do. But the point is, I had control over that. That's all I'm trying to say. People think that AI is just this weird, witch that you're asking to draw your picture at Disneyland, and it is. But you could ask that witch to draw things for you specifically. You don't have to.
100 monkeys typing. The idea is that eventually they dump out Shakespeare after. So
that makes more sense than you think.
Part of me, it's actually more plausible to believe that this is an assemblage of 5,000 people working on the same project, where they're doing a type of exquisite corpse where they're all working somehow kind of trompe-l'oeilizing between 2 different images, and it hops around and then eventually assumes it, but it's too unified. There's too, oh my, what the
The next thing is going to be control nets, because I need to use control nets to do trigonometry. And if you do trigonometry, then you can be like, you could use Unity to make a rail system. And then you could say, all right, now using this rail system, fill in the space, make a 3D space of a room.
Okay.
That's moving.
So repeatable camera swipes is what you're. So it's like I'm at the point of after consuming content my whole life, I'm beginning to really understand the framing, and I had a strong background with black and white photography, still, but there's so many more components. I never went to video because I knew I wasn't going to have the time to master each component. But sometimes, again, like even the movie Clerks, it's black and white, simple, it's direct, and it works for certain reasons. So it doesn't have to be everything. Whereas it feels like experiencing that AI art, that
right,
a little with especially with music, somehow it is a little bit of everything and nothing too.
Have you seen Google's new project, Imagine? This is what they're doing is now training control nets on video instead of on photos. And from that, there's amazing things that are happening, because it's pretty good at figuring out what the next step will be in a series of images. You can see some of my images look better than this, but at the same time, the
transitions between them aren't startling because it's not bending the reality that it's in.
Exactly.
It's a continuation of like the ship flying through there. It's
like
a
like
dialed back version.
Why won't it let me include make that clip bigger, dog? I don't know what's up with that. Point is, this is all the future. I mean, and every day AI is as bad as it will ever be, and tomorrow it will be better. So this is, everything is the worst it will be today. I love that about the future. The future is just constantly getting better all the time. I love it. Look at this control net video.
Used to be about hyper realism and being able to honor and replicate the subject as accurately as possible, and it was like a contest to see who could do it best. And like
I love the
test was
copyright
that it would
sign in
meet
the
the eye test. Whereas now we compare it to a photo, which is already an altered perception of the space.
dude, tar and feathering. That's so hardcore. No one ever did a movie like this before. It's amazing. Okay, we are near the last. Is there anything you wanted to make sure we covered? Because I know I kind of like cut off your show notes. Let's look at your show notes for a second. Yalda Boa.
When I organized it into a slideshow, it will be more worthy of going through.
We didn't get to the Nag Hammadi. That's what I didn't do. I love you, Stefan. We're gonna do another one on the Nag Hammadi. It could be like the Nadi Hammadi or something like that.
Top joke, and it's borderline, but
you're
not about the border. It is about a borderless border. And are you a border because you're staying in someone's house? And do you need borders? Are you having trouble with your border? Would you like a different border? And is the border fixing everything in your house and keeping it safe and being there's like
a Jewish border? I like where you're going with that. No.
So the joke is the modern day equivalent of Jackie Robinson is kind of like being a white cop, and maybe even like a cop with like racist perceived tattoos. Or even like overtly racist tattoos, but being a cop, and then you're kind of like, and then like stick them in Chicago or in Boston's predominantly African American, and we're known for having segregated living areas, but it's not a great comparison. I'm just trying to draw a little bit of awareness and maybe some mindful energy, and understanding what people have to go through just to do their job, which is already kind of, performing more than a public service, but risking everything they have for strangers all the time. Yeah. Just like you guys, tow your truck at 3 a.m. on the side of the highway might be using the tow truck that's really they have, and they keep working so that they can tow their farm equipment if it ever breaks down. But they're do this AAA thing where in the middle of the night, they'll go help a stranger in the middle of nowhere. Because God bless America, and it's like the environment created around Disney or around the House of David, and there's
You might think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but look at his hair.
Right,
obviously he knows. Look at that. I love this guy. If you want to
look at the figure 8 drawing there, just for 1 second, because I feel like the figure 8 drawing you did.
Yeah, it's about this.
New. So in the bottom left-hand corner there is like a word cloud fart.
Incubus,
which is the things that weigh on your shoulders, your unfulfilled dreams. It's also like kind of a demon that rapes you while you're sleeping, which is metaphorically kind of like your unfulfilled dreams. And then it gets processed into, you just got to close the loop on incubus and it becomes incubate. And I'm
glad that you somehow brought it back to Taylor Swift. Just kidding. Anyway, Stefan Kalin, though, I was going to try to show because you don't really have much going on your X.com, but if you go to Instagram, you go to Yoga Funk Knit, you can actually
I made a post on Twitter today, too. Yeah.
Dude, I mean, look at that. Look at all that hope. Look at all that hope in that boy. I don't know. And your sister looks nice too. And is that your grandmother or mother? That's your mother, right? That's your mother.
That is my mother in the center-ish.
Yeah.
And
lovely family
at my yoga studio across the street after a year of delays, and eventually maybe I'll be able to tune in from across, or literally walk the street
from the right angle. If you got this guy sober enough, he starts to look like Mark Zuckerberg, and I like it. I think it's weird. It's cool.
Part of me thinks, because my brother started Etsy, which is not quite as big as Facebook, but the idea of being given something, because in like New York, Boston rivalry, he was kind of an outcast and an artist that ran away to New York City, and then instead of like doing away with him, I want to be in this Power Rangers movie. I don't know, but he got given the opportunity and really, didn't sleep very much, I think, and doesn't really remember much of it. But he was the CEO of Etsy for like a long time, and everyone kind of worshipped him. And then he's been a family man and kind of a farmer and woodworker for a while. But no, if you stick him, I don't know if Mark would be older or younger than me, because who knows if even my own birthday is my own birthday. But no, there's like we're definitely, I don't know. See, I think I'm a mix of like almost 100% Ashkenazi and almost 100% Sephardic.
And 100% woman, baby. Yeah, exactly.
Whereas I don't know or if even to believe 23andMe. But
are you wearing a kippah right now?
When I was in Africa and the guys in the
front up wearing a yarmulke? I never.
They had a language that they spoke growing up, which was like a combination of a bunch of. And then I heard Zuckerberg a few times. I went, guys, I'm not related. If you're like gonna hold me hostage, like that's not me.
But well, a mitzvah for wearing your kippah, and I just want to say this is great. We're gonna do another one pretty quick about the Nag Hammadi.
It felt like a monkey day. I'm not sure if it was, but
it was monkeyish. Kind of like the ape. I felt like the ape, the grape ape. But what we'll do is we'll talk about the Nag Hammadi, and I do want to do something at some point where we could talk about like the Talmud, because I think it's really interesting to think about what it's like to when people look at the Talmud. There's a lot of people that just hate it and are afraid of it and don't understand. This is literally just people arguing and talking and debating with each other in history, and I like history.
And we don't attach divinity to it. We try to attach what we think is the most true or the best value.
Logic.
It's even there as a benchmark and placeholder, which you should err on one side of caution. Whereas in India, again, the philosophical schools were so specific, and the conversations they would have, you'd be able to drill down. It's like this teacher in this guy's opinion versus this is, and then what's the difference? And that's the and it's just about being specific enough so that you understand the terms you're working with to then engage in the dialect. So I got an email today saying, are you the S. Kalin cited in the book called Demonology as a Source of Research on the Provenance and Purpose of the Nag Hammadi Texts and Codices?
It's definitely this guy.
It's not me, but isn't that interesting?
You can't prove that. You can't prove it's not me. All right.
What if I click yes? That's the question is, what if I start clicking yes every time it asks me?
You should. Did I give you enough of a plug? Did you want to share your YouTube video or a place where you can find your content?
Yes, like I said, I'm eventually, I'm doing the slow play, and please direct all membership and activities and donations.
I mean, the reason why I want people to actually check out my bro here is because if you need
PayPal, and it's like more anonymous, and you don't get credit as a super chat, and not steal part of the conversation like I like to do sometimes, but.
He also doesn't talk as much while he doesn't talk as much while he's breathing and teaching you yoga. So like, there's a really great place for Stefan in your life teaching you.
When I start my classes by saying any yoga teacher, you're only supposed to really process about 30% of what they're saying, because it's the same thing each time, and eventually you pick up on that. So take one or two phrases about things you're paying attention to your body, focus on that, and let the rest. And it engages in passive listening. So then you're more focused on the poses, and then if English isn't the first language, or there's other language, if someone's teaching, and you might have to look around to see what to do, but generally the way of teaching yoga where you're using Sanskrit words really does nothing for the average English speaker. If you say warrior one in Sanskrit, that doesn't tell them anything about anything to do with their body. So that's my approach. Eventually that yoga video that I had on the beginning of the video, if viewers want to rewind back, will be part of some sort of festival release where I'm going to translate a yoga song into like 20 different languages and give it away to people so they can be social media stars. And I don't really want. I'd rather be anonymous than famous almost, but I'm like willing to be like under the wing of Andreas, because if he's willing to put himself out there and even have like a phone number that tells you you're a superstar if he leaves a message, he actually that's literally how I mean. That's funny. I've had that. My voicemail. So much more of a crazy guy who watched YouTube all the time, but because I participate in this, I just go one step. Sometimes I'm allowed in. Again, never guaranteed. Emphasis on loud. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for the first time again. Yeah. My message supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, then paradoxymoronic califragilisticexpialidocious. My voicemail has been leaving a message makes you a superstar since I was 13 years old. So it seems to work, and I just haven't changed it ever. My favorite t-shirt said, I dress this way to offend you. And, I still like offending people, but I tend to dress more like, I have like a yoga superhero. I know what you guys can do. Go to tartarynova.com, join the Discord, get involved with the community. It's bulletproof because we're connected. What's going on the Discord? Actually, a lot of cool stuff's been going on the Discord. We have a ton of members. It's like almost. Because if we're going to organize this clips channel, that's where the other people. Yeah, that's the meeting place. It's safe. The Discord's really great. Why won't it just let me into my own Discord, bro? You don't have to become Facebook friends. You don't have to socialize outside of the context of how do we make sure that Andreas is able to continue providing this space for freeform conversations, leaning into the unknown. Just become uncancelable. We're trying to become uncancelable. If you couldn't tell, that streak of disclosure. We're being uncancelable. Yeah. All right. Love you, bro. Love you all. Take care, everybody. Have a good night, buddy. Ciao.
so long as I'm in this Oval Office.